Never a dull moment at the home of the world champions. Chelsea sack Thomas Tuchel after a disappointing result at Dinamo Zagreb. Let's get into it.
And blue is the colour. SCN! Drogba! Lampard! That could be the championship.
Greetings! Welcome back to Couch Critic with me, Dennis P, for what is your breaking news edition of Couch Critic, where we look at the sacking of Thomas Tuchel. Unbelievable story. I know there's been a lot being said of it already, and I'm just going to give you my 2 cents real quick. But before I do that, please do me a big favor. Hit the like button, subscribe button, bell notification button to keep up with the latest and the newest. And if you do choose, please check out my sponsors. They go by the name of... And if you so choose, please check out my sponsors. They go by the name of Major League Socks. And fellas, if you ever want to walk in the footsteps of greatness, you know what to do. Hit them up. The link will be in the description. Okay, wow. We enter another murky period at Chelsea Football Club. Never seems to be a dull moment at this club, regardless of who the ownership group is. We have now just sacked Thomas Tuchel from football operations after giving him £271 million to work with in the transfer window, in which he was key in bringing in targets. Now, I'm not going to get to the specifics about the signings and the specifics about this actual sacking. I'm just going to give you my musings and whatnot, what I feel like might be happening around behind the scenes and whatnot, and you know, give that more focus, more shine. I'm just going to focus on what I think might be happening behind the scenes for the last little while, and you know, basically look to make 2 and 2 equal 5, because we don't necessarily know the true inner workings, but I'm just reading the tea leaves, and what I see goes well beyond, you know, the slow start that we had on the pitch. First of all, I just want to thank Thomas Tuchel for his stewardship at the club, his leadership and whatnot. The last 9 months have been crazy and a lot of upheaval and whatnot, and he's navigated it quite well. He's spoken really eloquently, and I think that he's actually represented the club in the right fashion, and you know, for all that, of course, with the Champions League and the 2 cups as well. I have to thank him for that, and I wish him all the best in the future. With that said, there has been a lot going on behind the scenes that, you know, I'm kind of catching wind to now that may have led to the sacking altogether. I mean, clearly, when a new manager, new ownership comes in, they want to establish their own personality, their own sort of way of doing things, and that's been on display the last 4 or 5 months. You know, we went into this whole period with Boehly clearly thinking that Marina Granovkaia and the rest of the directors were going to be, Peter Cech, were going to be hands-on navigating this window and bringing in the changes that this club needed going forward. And right at the beginning of the window, we got rid of those 2, and you know, it was very murky after that. Obviously, Boehly took control of the club and the director of football role, basically had to build new relationships all over the world, and you know, basically bring in the players that Thomas Tuchel wanted. That process in and of itself is very difficult, and it was the first inkling that led me to believe that Boehly is not only about business, but he's about seeing things run his own way. And you know, not too long after that, a couple days ago, we see that the director of scouting was let go as well, and Scott McLaughlin. And you know, that was for me elation. I was happy to see him go, because I really did feel like he was a bit of a hindrance for, you know, the style of football that we wanted to play. He was bringing in marquee talent and bringing in, you know, big names to suit corporate brands, rather than bringing in people that fit with the style of play that we're playing at the club. So I was happy to see him go, but you know, there were the tea leaves were there. I was reading the tea leaves, and we can see the warning signs were there that this day was imminent now, and here it is. You know, I'm still in shock. I'm not going to lie to you guys. It's not something I expected to happen anytime soon, but the fact that we've completely cleared the entire structure of the football club right now, with the last stumbling block, the last block in place being Thomas Tuchel from the old regime, you had to think that this was something that was going to happen. And you know, now, you know, you can't go into this thinking that this was just a shotgun thing. You know, we lost to Dinamo Zagreb, so you know, Boehly just said, you know, off with his head, we got to get rid of this guy. This has been in the works for quite some time right now. If you look, of course, at the structure, people being pulled out of their roles, and if you look at the fact that we're in advanced talks with Graham Potter, I mean, you don't make those types of decisions, you know, shotgun clauses just overnight. These are things that have been brewing for a while, and I think it comes down to a lot of what people have been saying about, you know, Thomas Tuchel for quite some time now. He's very hard to work with, very, very difficult to work with behind the scenes, and, you know, maybe that came to the fore when he was working with Todd Boehly through this transfer window. Maybe Todd Boehly was not only evaluating him as a person, but how he is to work with people. And, you know, that whole period where we're linked with Rafinha, we're linked with Koundé, we're linked with Lewandowski, all these names and whatnot coming into the club. Ronaldo being a big one as well. I mean, I'm wondering if through that period, you know, Todd Boehly just came to the conclusion that he does not feel comfortable working with Thomas Tuchel. And if he doesn't feel comfortable working with Thomas Tuchel, then bringing in a director of football to work with Thomas Tuchel is probably not the right way to go either. Maybe they just weren't compatible in a working environment, and, you know, this summer transfer window was the grace period to figure out if they can actually figure out if they can, you know, assemble together and work together and, you know, move forward. And after the transfer window expired, you know, Todd Boehly had come to the conclusion that this is not who he wants to push on with going forward. But with that said, you're going to ask me, and I'm sure it's on the question in everyone's mind, that how do you spend £271 million and not know that this is the guy that you want to invest in? I mean, what sense does that make right now? And I don't have the answers to that. I'm still baffled by this decision. You bring in Koulibaly, you bring in Cucurella, you bring in Fofana, you bring in Sterling, you bring in, who am I forgetting, Aubameyang, probably being the biggest name that we brought in. And then the notion is that, you know, this is the style of football that we're going to be running with for the next year at the very least. You don't bring in Aubameyang if you don't think that Thomas Tuchel is going to be the manager. It just seems odd to me that that would be the case. But, you know, you do that and, you know, you sack him after 59 minutes on the pitch. You know, after that partnership was reunited after 59 minutes, which is very, very odd. But again, I can't speak to that. Maybe there was a plan in place before, and then after discussions they've come to the conclusion that this is just an untenable situation. I mean, clearly the squad do not seem to be taking to the instructions of Thomas Tuchel. I mean, that was evidenced last night, and you heard my last pod, my last video where I was speaking directly to this. You know, guys just don't look like they're taking on the instructions of Thomas Tuchel. They just don't look they look disinterested on the pitch. There's a body language that just does not equate to, you know, running through walls for manager. And that was the exact same thing that we saw, you know, under Jose Mourinho a few years ago, under Antonio Conte a few years back as well. And, you know, the exact opposite of what we saw under Thomas Tuchel when he came to Chelsea. When he first came to Chelsea, one of the things that I loved and revered him for is the fact that he was able to put, you know, take guys in from out the cold, put an arm around them, and, you know, welcome them back into the squad. We were such a tight group at that point. Like, everyone was feeling good about football and being a member of this football club. And it just seems like it's the exact opposite in this moment in time right now, where, you know, we have a playing staff that don't want to play for him. We have players that want to be out of the club. And, you know, it's just all of these things that seem to be culminating at the same time, you know. The closest thing we had to the club right now representing, you know, a football man was Thomas Tuchel. He's now gone. Scott McLaughlin, the director of international scouting, is now gone. You know, so it's just the Boehly clearly group right now. It's a shell of a company right now. There's absolutely no structure there. So that leads me to the next point. Was this always planned? Was this part of the plan? Like, obviously Marina, check taken out. We took out the director of scouting, and then now we've taken out the manager. Was this part of the plan? Has Boehly spoken to a director of football already? Do we have somebody lined up who just does not want to work with Thomas Tuchel? You know, that's the only thing that makes legitimate sense to me right now, because the investment that was made at this club and, you know, the time that was invested into finding these players for Thomas Tuchel just is immense. Like, it was just too much time for it to only be given 7 games. So in my opinion, Boehly had a clash with Tuchel over the transfer window. He brought in his targets as best he could, but decided that he's not somebody that he wants to work with going forward, based on the fact that, like, you know, his personality type is not what he likes in, you know, his managers. And when speaking to the director of football said, you know what, potentially this is not who I want to work with either. I would rather go in a different direction. I want to start clean. I want to be able to bring in my own guy. That's the only thing that makes sense to me right now. You bring in your own guy and you know, clean house to allow for him to flourish in the role. If this is not the case, this is a very, very difficult pill to swallow right now because, like I said before, there's absolutely no structure at this club right now. You know, we're looking at bringing in Graham Potter, who I think is a great manager, you know, obviously taking Brighton from, you know, almost relegation zone to, you know, mid-table and higher, playing great football. But, you know, the other things that you have to take in consideration when you're looking at managing a club the size of Chelsea is, can you attract players to come play your style of football? Can you, you know, get coaxed great performances out of top players? I mean, it's very easy to get performances from players who aren't necessarily household names in the game, you know. Very easy to get them to run through walls for you because the manager is basically the structure and the hierarchy of the club at that point. Like, it's manager, you know, then playing staff after that. But at Chelsea, you don't necessarily see that all the time. And with these players, you know, the likes of Lukaku being a perfect example, forcing their way out, Werner forcing their way out, whatnot. Player power is very strong at this club, and at most big clubs, to be honest. You're looking at Mbappe, who basically owns PSG right now. You know, this is rampant around football these days. So can Todd Boehly and can, you know, Graham Potter, if that's who it is that they're eyeing, can he be a guy that can attract these talents? Can he be a guy that can manage the personality types of the big football clubs? And, you know, it's all something that remains to be seen. I mean, the timing was weird, but at the same time, it makes perfect sense to me. If this was, you know, a predetermined plan, something that was supposed to happen from some time ago, because, you know, like I said before, the directors have been removed, the international scout has been removed. If Boehly would have come in and just cleaned house right away, you know, what would the fan base be thinking right now? You know, I would be irate, to be honest with you, because I just don't trust him as a football man yet. I mean, I understand he's a businessman and he's owned sports teams before, but, you know, EPL, you know, the UEFA in general is a different thing altogether. And, you know, you need somebody that has experience and personality to run the ship. And if you pull out all these pieces that have been, you know, at the club, institutions at the club for a while now, and you don't have a succession plan in place, I mean, man, that's just really extremely short-sighted, especially after spending £271 million. So again, if this was part of the plan right away, then maybe Boehly played it the right way and basically, you know, waited until there was a dark patch in performances before he can pull the trigger and do what he wanted to do from time. You know, we've seen that before. He wouldn't have won over a lot of the supporters given what Thomas Tuchel had to go through the tail end of last year with the sanctions and whatnot, getting us top 3 cup finals and whatnot. And, you know, going into this window looking to, you know, really invigorate the squad and get, you know, the players in that he needs. I don't think Todd Boehly would have been likening himself to this football club by just cleaning house right then, from then and there. And, you know, even now, there's a lot of people that are very upset about what has happened. You know, hasn't been given enough time to really implement his plan. But again, I'm on both sides of the fence of this because I understand that this is a two-way street. Granted, Boehly probably wants his own people, but at the same time, when you look at what we're seeing from Thomas Tuchel right now, we're looking at the relationships that are developing at the club right now, on and off the pitch. There had to be something done, maybe. You know, clearly there is a disconnect between what Thomas Tuchel wants to do on the football pitch and what the players want to do on the pitch as well, you know, and clearly there has been a falling out with a multitude of players. You know, some left, some are still here. And if that's the case, then there's no time like the present to get rid of that, start new, and hope that we can build on you know, and hope that we can start forging new relationships that we can build on our lasting. I mean, we're signing players to 6-7 year contracts right now. If we're not sure of the manager, you know, and not sure that the manager, you know, cultivates good relationships, this can be going pear-shaped real quickly. So what's next? Clearly, we can't be looking back anymore. Todd Boehly is making the decisions right now, and he's decided to let go of Thomas Tuchel. What is next? I am imploring this ownership group, please, before you make any decisions about who the next manager is going to be, I'm hoping you already have in mind who the director of football is, and you've already had, you know, maybe a deal memo put on the table and it's been accepted, because this makes absolutely no sense in terms of structure to pull out the last football man that you have at the club and then hire another, basically, you know, a greenish manager before you have the director in football who's supposed to be in charge of all of that. Allow him to select who he needs. Allow him to select who he wants in his role as manager, head coach, however you want to look at it. I just think it's putting the cart before the horse. If you bring in the manager, then you bring in the director of football after him. If this is part of a succession plan, and we've already had discussions with the director of football, and he's already said, you know, I don't really want to work with Thomas Tuchel. Here are my candidates. Can you bring in one of these? By all means, I'm 100% behind it. I've never not backed a manager to come into Chelsea. I just feel like we have to have more structure in place before we make that next step. So Graham Potter, of course there are pros and cons with him. I think one of the pros is this guy has an eye for talent. He definitely is very good at developing young talent. I mean, if you look at that Brighton side right now, there are a lot of young players in there that are flourishing under his tutelage right now. I think that that's something that Chelsea are going to have to use going forward. When you look at, you know, who we were outlining in the transfer window, the Casaides, you know, the Chukwuemekas, who else? The Gordons, you know, all sorts of like young talents that, you know, we're trying to mold into a specific style of football. And I think that was probably part of the reason why Thomas Tuchel was not really favored. He doesn't really like working with young players. You know, you saw him sell Billy Gilmore to Brighton, to Graham Potter's Brighton, as a matter of fact. And, you know, maybe that was him falling on his own sword. The fact that we need to get younger, we need to be able to like develop young talent and implement them into our squad. That might be something that, you know, maybe Thomas Tuchel doesn't have the appetite for, and as a result, you know, wasn't the right fit for this club anymore. I feel like Graham Potter can do that. I also like the fact that we're being linked with also bringing in the head of his recruitment staff. I mean, I'm all for this if this is what the direction is. You know, this Kyle McCauley guy has gone all over Europe and uncovered diamonds in the rough everywhere and brought them to, you know, Graham Potter, who has in turn, you know, molded these guys into proper football players and then sold them on for exorbitant fees after that, you know. This is exactly what Chelsea need to be doing, you know, obviously cultivating our own talent and building young. We're not going to be able to buy the marquee talents year after year. We're going to have to be able to find a few diamonds in the rough, you know, use some of the analytics and data available to us to find the next players, you know, that fit the mold of the football that we're trying to play on a cheaper scale than what we've been paying the last little while, and bringing them into the club and developing them. If there's anything that I can commend Graham Potter for, is his player development has been fantastic. So if this is what we're going for, if this is the direction we're going in, I can completely take my hat off to Thomas Tuchel and, you know, wish him luck. But at the same time, if Todd Boehly has identified that this is the direction he wants to go in, more player development rather than marquee names, you know, younger players coming in to fit the style of football that the manager has on offer, then that's great news for Chelsea. You know, I think that in order to get players to buy into a manager's philosophy, they have to be not household names, you know, they have to be players that are just trying to find their football right now. And to speak to that, like, the style of football that we play at Chelsea is very, very demanding, you know. You have a style of football that is asking players to press up and down the pitch, you know, win the ball, you know, be defensively sound. And like, there's players on that squad right now that only really want to be operating in the final third, you know, and that in and of itself speaks to the fact that, you know, Thomas Tuchel just was not able to get them or to coax their best football out of them, because he's not basically playing to their strengths. He's basically playing to his style, his particular philosophy, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but do you have the right players to fulfill that? Do players want to play that style of football? That's the other thing that we have to focus on. And, you know, by all intents and purposes, it looks like no, because, you know, if the last game is any indication of what we're going to see going forward, players are down tooling right now because they just don't like the style of football that's on offer. I'm just going to wrap by saying this. Todd Boehly, you are a brave, brave soul to go into this period, you know, very, very important period, a very, very time without any football men in and around the club. If I am right and that you have already outlined who the director of football is and they've outlined who their next coach is and you've brought him in, you know, Graham Potter, then everything I say here right now, just cancel it right now. I think that you've done the right thing. You have to get your own people in there. But I mean, this just seems like a scattergun approach until we get all the information. If you're not, you know, if you just sack Thomas Tuchel on the backs of just backing him to the amount of 271 million, I mean, this is murky position for Chelsea Football Club going forward. But, you know, I'm holding the faith. I'm thinking that you have something more in mind and you have a succession plan in place. But guys, I'm just going to wrap it up there. I really don't have much more to say. I'm going to wait and see where this all plays out, and I think we all would be in good interest to do the exact same. But until then, keep the blue flag flying high and up the Chels. Peace.